Our speaker for today is Steve Hall. His presentation will discuss some of the many new initiatives around the globe in mining education and how Australian institutions might ride the third wave of mining education to success in the 21st century. So could you please put your hands together? Oh, I should also mention Michael Catchwell, the CEO of the AusIMM is here tonight, as well as Stacey Harris from the head office in Melbourne. Please put your hands together. Welcome, Steve.
Thank you, Ivor. I put the lack of audience down to tomorrow night's metallurgy talk on the history of flotation, being a metallurgist. But thank you for the real explanation. What I'm going to try and do this evening is perhaps to follow on from the last time I was in this room when it was really pleasing to hear Minister Norman Moore say that he thought Curtin University was finally getting its act together regarding AusIMM. And I hope in this presentation to give you the same confidence. I've just survived my first diggers and dealers. I should explain I took this position nearly 12 months ago, almost a year this week, and actually missed diggers and dealers. I was flying somewhere and didn't get there. Diggers and dealers perhaps is not as politically correct as some other mining conferences around the world. And I put up this cartoon from the West Australian, possibly just to highlight that, but also to point out that the gold scales that were auctioned during diggers and dealers, and the mining guy on the left, and not sure if that's you, Chris, is saying, "Crikey, bet those little beauties could tell a story or two." And of course, looking beyond the auction, we have one of Kalgoorlie's skimpies saying, "Cheeky little bugger." Well, the good news was that the gold scales actually were auctioned for $105,000, and those $105,000 go towards scholarships for students in Kalgoorlie. So it was quite an event, and also, as I say, a lot of good news. And that's what I hope to pass on. Takeaway message for those of you that want to nod off or nip out early is that AusIMM is a success story, whatever people perhaps want to say or tell. It actually has an exciting future in Kalgoorlie, in Bentley, here in Perth and globally. And we'd like to think that AusIMM graduates still set the standard. Obviously, I'm a little bit biased in that regard. Just very little bits of history. Of course, AusIMM opened in Kalgoorlie in 1903. It's my honour to be the 11th director. As I say, I started just over a year ago. But I also completed a Masters by Research in Kalgoorlie back in the very early 1980s. And so some of the comparisons that I conduct are over 30 years, and obviously now you can see the reason for that. Researching a presentation I gave a year ago at the AusIMM Sustainable Mining Conference in Kalgoorlie, I came along this quote, and I think it's really still worth pointing out, because if you go to the bottom of that quote, you'll find out this was actually written 30 years ago. And at that time, it was saying that the graduates were not quite what they used to be, because they didn't get out and get that professional experience whenever the opportunity arose. They just wanted long-term security with a minimum inconvenience and a damn good salary. I think all we just need to add on to that is now and a damn good cup of coffee. And we've summed up the criticisms of the graduates of today, many of them. It came actually from the De Beers annual magazine from that year, 1980. I also used this slide in the same conference presentation around sustainable mining because, of course, mining is one of those few sustainable industries, along again with perhaps prostitution and universities. Not always politically correct, as I've pointed out, but all influenced by policies, regulation and enforcement. And this is really the space the universities now find themselves in. Lots of policy, lots of audit, and many ways of actually earning what often is still insufficient dollars to do the job. These headlines were recent a year ago, but I think they're still worth pointing out. From the UK, universities now struggling financially would be left to go bankrupt. Almost unheard of type of headlines and comments. Behind that comment is the fact that the universities in the UK are required to report a surplus of at least 4% each year. Otherwise, they are entered onto an at-risk register. So we don't have shareholders, we don't make profit, but we are expected to make a surplus to cover our costs going forward. Michael's here, might remember that headline from a year ago, Governments and Universities Failing in Minerals Education. And it was probably rightly so, a shot at both the funding and the performance of the sector. I'm not sure it was directly aimed at AusIMM. However, the comment on the bottom, of course, is that good news doesn't sell newspapers. And I've experienced a few of those other headlines in my time in Kalgoorlie, as I know other directors have over history. This is the balancing act that the universities are being asked to try and get right, the balance between teaching and research, balancing quantity and quality. As I say, we get funded, or we will be funded shortly, for good performance in both domains, and we ask our academic staff to be equally good or get that balance right for us collectively, if not at least all individually. I borrowed this slide from Tony James, who's the head of the AusIMM Graduates Association. We'll ignore the yellow line, but if we just look at the green line at the bottom there, it just shows how the cumulative total of AusIMM graduates out of Kalgoorlie has increased over the years, and that significant upward trend. We'll come back to the AusIMM and their submission to the government funding review. And hopefully after I'll have a chance to talk with Michael about what was behind this, because I must add, I was not in any way an instigator of this submission to the federal government. However, I do appreciate it, and the fact that supporting the revival of specialised schools of mines is a way forward for Australia, and interestingly, a lot of the developing world sees this as a way forward. I'm advising on probably at least 4 or 5 well-advanced projects around the world on, if you like, how to get the AusIMM model to work in these countries. One of the major challenges will be in the staffing. That critical mass of staff that are able to provide quality hands-on learning experiences for the students. There's often no lack of good curriculum because, as many of these people eventually share with me, they've borrowed the AusIMM curriculum. That's not difficult. And money and the commitment of industry, governments, and organisations such as the World Bank is often behind them. But where are they going to find, as I say, the quality teachers? That's what they need at the moment. Later, their aspirations will probably be to do research of their own. So AusIMM today is actually 5 departments, 3 of them based at our Bentley campus, 2 of them based in Kalgoorlie, and collectively AusIMM has 1,600 students, 1,600 students. It has around 150 staff, and if my Vice-Chancellor allows me, next year it will have a budget of approximately $50 million. So it's big business. But have a look at the global situation. It's been estimated that 3 or 4 years ago that there were perhaps around 250 mining schools worldwide, graduating approximately 2,500 mining engineers a year. Doesn't take a mathematical genius to work out that many of those mining schools, by definition, must be very small and vulnerable.